So when she gave birth, then they would kick that guy out of the house for a month. And then all the aunties and grandmas would move into the house. And for 30 days, this new mama would have, someone to hold the baby, someone to bathe. It was mind blowing to me.
That's Andrea McTague, founder and CEO of Shift Psych. This is The Shift Show, and my name is Zach Erickson. Today, we have a really exciting episode because it's the very first new episode of The Shift Show. So far, we've been hitting you with the greatest hits from our past version of the show, and we will continue to delight you with those. But today, we're actually bringing you the first with Andrea and Sarah O'Brien, who is one of our psychologists out of our Calgary office. Together, they are going to be talking all about pregnancy and postpartum difficulties and all of the different things that go along with that. Like, what are some of the struggles that people don't talk about? Postpartum depression and anxiety, how common is it? Is there a right way to do all of this? It's a really great episode, and I'm really excited for you at home to hear it. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
You're listening to The Shift Show, where we use psychological insight to unravel the craziness of life for you. You growth mindset person, you. Tune in every other Thursday to hear some wacky psychologists demystify what exactly is happening in that weird organ that lives inside your skull. And for this especially delicious podcast experience, we can thank our friends at Shift Psych, the people who deliver a results-driven and innovative approach in therapy land. Throughout the podcast, we'll throw down some serious psych gems, but these are certainly not a replacement for treatment by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So please seek one out if you need help.
Hey, Sarah, how's it going today?
Good, Andrea. Good to talk to you.
I know we have our lovely little conversations today. We're going to have a great conversation, though, about everything from pregnancy all the way to birth stuff, all the way to transitioning into momhood. So that's kind of our topic today. Super small one, right? Not covering a lot of stuff or anything.
No.
Just nothing.
Pretty simple stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of like what we want to talk about are the psychological pieces to everyday life. And I think like coming into parenthood is a pretty big one. Well, let's tell the guests a little bit about you. So you have an interesting background because you kind of have a double career thing going, and then you have another important role as well. You're a psychologist with Shift. Before that, you had another life.
I did, yes. Back in the old days, I was a nurse, so I do have a background in nursing, and I also have an active role as a mom. I have a little guy. He's now just 2, and we love him to bits, and he is definitely has taught me a lot.
And does this special little man in your life have a name?
His name is Archer, so we like to kind of call him Archie from time to time.
Busy guy, 2 years old.
Busy, I would say, is maybe an understatement. I thought that I was busy before, but I've never seen the level of toddler boy busy before. So it's just kind of blowing my mind. I feel like if you could harness that energy and sell it, you'd be a millionaire.
I know. I have 3 nephews, and like I built a fort with one of them 7 times because we build fort, destroy fort, build fort again, destroy fort. On the 8th time, I was like, no. And there was like meltdown tantrum. Like I was an unreasonable human. Let's chat a little bit about how it was for you then, because you've got, these multiple careers. You've come into like being a professional and having little Archer. How was that for you? Like just from everything from the decision to, having a small human that you, especially we're recording this right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So that also a little sprinkle of additional crazy there.
Absolutely. So it's interesting because my journey to momhood was slightly maybe longer than, I'm what they would call an older mom. The unfortunate medical term is geriatric pregnancy, if you can believe that.
Yes.
Horrible,
because everything over 35 is considered a geriatric pregnancy, right?
It's
very
sad.
sexy.
That's its own thing. But yeah, really, it's been a humbling experience for me because I kind of always had the sense that, when you bring like a new fresh human into the world, that's a pretty big deal.
I would say.
As prepared, I think, as you think you are, it's always very disarming, kind of catches you off guard and you realize you're like, wow, I really have nothing under control. But that's okay. It's not always a bad thing. It's kind of a nice state to be in sometimes.
So you think it's like a little bit freeing because you kind of get to go back into their little world of the way they see things. I think is very interesting. And
yes.
I think we talk about this a lot in session. We talk about the walnut brain versus the cognitive brain. So I'm sure your cognitive brain is like, this is a beautiful thing. Yay. And the walnut brain, where the like limiting beliefs live, is probably not saying the same thing, I would think.
No. Oh, no. I think in terms of motherhood, that's probably its own list of limiting beliefs. Absolutely. And definitely probably some activations, right, of those beliefs that maybe weren't necessarily a big thing until you hit motherhood.
Well, I think it's like even our most connected relationships are the things that will bring out most of our triggers or reactions. That's why sometimes we're completely fine until we get into our first like serious romantic relationship. And there's a whole boatload of triggers in that. And this is like for everybody. This isn't like a clinical thing. It's just like everyone on the planet. I would love to meet someone who's like, nope, nothing activates me at all. Not like motherhood, not having a relationship. No, we all have stuff because it comes up from other things. And I think when we get into those romantic relationships, we're getting into, these patterns that we grew up with. And I assume those same patterns come up when we are all of a sudden asked to do this other task, which is parenting, or even like thinking about parenting sometimes. And you'll have a whole bunch of patterns from how you grew up. And then if you've got a partner in the mix, that whole thing and how to reconcile that. We're going to leave some of that stuff for another podcast though. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit more about basically like we'll start at pregnancy. We'll do another one. We'll do a great, lovely thing on fertility. We've actually got a cute one coming up on that. But let's go from pregnancy to the whole transition into momhood. And we'll talk a little bit about how it is in the normalized experience, quote unquote, and all the way into some clinical stuff, because that is something that we also see. I think it's something that you've mentioned to me, and I understand as well that sometimes it's missed. And where is that line will be one of the things that we want to define a little bit. And then what can we do to support the new mom in our lives? Or what can you do to prepare yourself or to support yourself if you are that new mom? Yeah. So pregnancy, what do you think for you and what do you see in your client experience?
Well, I think, pregnancy right off the bat is, there's kind of this saying that the minute you find out you're pregnant, you're a mother, right? And with fathers, it's more like when they meet the baby, they're fathers. So right off the bat, moms are kind of going through some pretty intense changes, right?
Yeah.
Physically as well as that.
Because essentially you meet the baby kind of before they meet the baby, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That, it's complicated to say the least, right? And in the best of times, pregnancy can be, uncomfortable, stressful, can bring about a lot of, unknowns, Pandora's box sometimes, so to speak. But if you add to that, like other dynamics, right? Do you have a supportive partner? Are you working? Are you in school? What are you trying to do, right? As you're also basically building a human from scratch.
Oh yeah. So you got to like do life and then also make an eyeball that day.
Yeah. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, right? Using your brain while you're also like growing another brain, you would think give you some
double
kind of superpower.
No.
Probably it might make you like cry for no reason or at a random commercial. It's just very bizarre.
Well, but even the thing about, my particular specialty is I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So my female entrepreneurs, one of their biggest fears is, hey, what if I get morning sickness? I can't be in that boardroom meeting and also turn around and throw up. And I've heard there's a varying experience of how difficult that is or how people find their first trimester or whatnot. But even the anticipation that it might be like that is something I think that women who are pregnant or planning on becoming pregnant have to consider that isn't really in the realm of a lot of other people, right? Be they like men or women that don't want to do that or can't do that or whatever, or in that position. So I think it starts very early from even thinking of how to get that done.
Well, exactly, right. And I think, the other level to that is not all women are comfortable disclosing they're pregnant, right? In the beginning. So I think it adds to that stress that you just mentioned is, what if I'm developing these really strong physical symptoms? What if somebody offers me a drink at a party and I obviously am not going to take that, but I'm not ready to tell everyone I'm pregnant. It is very hard to navigate. So it is quite uncomfortable at times, I think, and it can cause a lot of stress.
Can I ask you, how long was it that you waited? I'm invasive in my questioning. It makes me a good shrink. Did you wait a long time? Because I know that there's that first trimester rule that was traditional. People are like moving away from that as we become more open about it. So where were you at?
I was actually about 7 weeks. So I had kind of just basically found out, and I shared it with family, like just very close. It wasn't until we were closer to that 3-month mark where I kind of just let everyone know. And it wasn't for any real reason. I would have told everyone right in the beginning, but kind of just worked out that way.
Yeah. Well, it's also a weird thing too, because you're like, how do I, and is it relevant to everybody? You know what I mean? Like, how do you make the announcement? I know there's a lot of social media stuff. We see like, gender reveal parties or birth reveal parties, or like, it's a bit different, right? Then I think historically you just tell the people in your life, but now there's like a bit of a platform. So there's a whole other weird thing about that. One thing that we're not really going to touch on in this podcast, and purposely, because Sarah and I talked about it and we thought that miscarriage and grief, loss, stillbirth, we think that deserves its entire own forum. We didn't want to just like have it and then like move it aside. So it's intentional that we're not going to chat about that a lot today. But there's also a bit of that too. And that can get into, especially if you're in a pregnancy subsequent to an incident like that, either yours or another person's as well, because we've all had friends, I think, that are in our social circle that we know about having fertility issues or situations like that, or even just wanting a partner. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that makes that initial stage, I think, really complicated. So
absolutely.
Did you, when you did do you're like, I'm pregnant, did you find it to be like, what was that experience like for you? Was it good? Was it relieving? Was it more anxiety inducing? Was it all of the above?
Yeah, well, in general, I think I was pretty excited to share just the general, like obviously our family, I wasn't really expecting, anything negative. It was kind of
like, well, damn it, you're procreating.
Like, yeah. It's like, well, you're married, and it's kind of like, hey, well, finally, that was kind of more the attitude we got. But everyone was quite excited and happy. So I wasn't expecting too much there. And I was really relieved actually, because it meant that I could kind of be my sick self. And, I didn't have to make excuses about why I couldn't eat this or I couldn't drink that.
So go to bed at 6 p.m. or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Where I'm just like, okay, I'm kind of cranky today. Sorry.
I'm growing a human.
There's a whole
deal
lot
with it
going on right now.
Well, and I think though, like in our client population, we've seen a lot of different circumstances where maybe that baby wasn't the expected news, or it sometimes isn't even good news. Sometimes it's a very big debate and different levels of reception, right? You take that to your like 15-year-old daughter, the story becomes a bit different. Or for a lot of people as well, right? So that starts happening. So now you're into, trimester 2. And what are we thinking about pregnancy and the complexities around that for women, especially women right now? It's an interesting time. I think more of us are in the workforce than have ever been before. And we're trying to do it and do all the other things as well. And pregnancy is one of those big other things. So what are your thoughts on that?
So for me personally, I can tell you that I was working throughout my pregnancy, and, obviously that's not the same for every woman. The second trimester too, it's supposed to be easier than the first. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
it's variable. I think
it's kind of a cool stage, right? Like that's when you're getting into kind of like the belly starts to kind of take shape. It becomes a lot more obvious, you're pregnant. And so you may get that great feedback from the public, right? Like, here, have my seat sometimes. You get those like little chivalry acts, right? At that stage too, you really start to connect with the fact that you now have like another human being, really.
So it becomes like more concrete for you then as well.
Yeah,
like you can
that's when you start feeling kicks for the first time, right? And all that cool stuff. You get to find out the gender, So for me personally, I really felt a lot more connected to my pregnancy in that second trimester. I know, like obviously that'll probably be different for everybody, but
I think everything about any experience in life, I think, is like fairly variable, and we see a lot of that in our clients. It depends on like you said, the other circumstances, like what's happening around or whatnot. So anything we say is going to be a generalized or a personalized experience, right?
Absolutely.
So as it continues, we've got, as you get into your third trimester, actually it was funny because like someone very close to us that's been a big shifter for a long time, she's doing 3 days actually. So she came over and she'd had a very easy pregnancy. I asked her about it and she's like, okay, now I'm getting nervous because like now this big event is coming. So there's a lot of stuff around that, right? Like, so you kind of have some time to acclimatize maybe to the pregnancy, but then there's like end thing. It's very scary for a lot of people, or a very spiritual thing for a lot of people. There's a lot of meaning, I think, around the birth planning. So maybe chat with me a little bit about what have you seen like clinically and personally around the birth thing? Because that's also something that your person with you, your partner, isn't necessarily going to be involved in it in the same way that you are. Not involved, but is happening to you.
Yeah. They're kind of more of a witness, right? As opposed to an act person. So yeah, I think the third trimester, that's when things get really serious, so to speak, because you are getting quite a bit bigger. Like, in the second trimester, you kind of have that cute little bump. And by the third trimester, you are like, oh my goodness, I can't see my feet.
I don't
fit my shoes. It's intense. If you're going to be dealing with any kind of like extra pains and discomfort, that's going to be the time. So it can really start to weigh on you literally and kind of mentally, I think.
Well, I think it's almost like and a lot of, I think women report towards the third trimester. Now you are getting into severe sleep disruptions, which we know outside of the pregnancy thing, just sleep disruption messes with your mood. And you've already got some mood stuff happening because your hormones are changing, a lot of physical pain, right? Because your body's like, okay, we got to make way for this thing to come out, etc.
Oh yeah. Like in terms of like how, like your organs literally change orientation when you're like in your third trimesters. Yeah, your body is not functioning in a way necessarily that work for you. It's kind of more about making sure this little guy gets fully developed and comes into the world, right? So it definitely impacts sleep. It impacts, mobility. It impacts emotions.
And I think we see, like I've seen a lot in our clinical population, a lot of people that have severe health anxiety and phobias involved in this. At this time too, I'm sure you get a lot of people get a lot of opinions about how to do the birth thing, because there's a lot of social narrative around that.
Yes. There is a lot of, unfortunately, misinformation around what makes a good birth, right? So it's important to just be skeptical and critically think, because you're going to hear from people, they might be well-meaning, right? And they share their own experience. It's very important to recognize that not every woman is the same. Labor and birth is going to be the same. Even the same woman will not likely have the same type of labor and birth.
Not only the physiological experience of it, but also like your value structures around it. It might be really important for one person to have one without any medication, to do it in a water bath or whatever. And for somebody else, it might be really important for that to be mitigated, to have their partners. And I think one of the things that we're seeing consistently, and this is something that in general at Shift we focus on a lot, is creating autonomous structures so that you can do in your life, assuming that you're not like going to become a serial killer or erode somebody else's autonomy, but in your life, do it the way you want without a lot of input from other people that is unwanted, right? Like you might take those trusted advisors and go, okay, this worked for you, or trusted sources of information. But I think we see a lot, especially when there's a lot of invasions, I think, of privacy on pregnant women, both legally and otherwise. So maybe chat with me about your experience or your experience in terms of a clinician working with people. What do you see?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon with pregnancy, because I can connect to this feeling myself, as well as some of the people I've talked to. You kind of get that sense that you are just sort of like a vessel sometimes, right? Like the mom just sort of like is there. We're the incubator, but the baby, and of course, a baby is important, right?
Yes.
And moms know this, but it would be nice to kind of have that kind of support on the mom, pat on the mom's shoulder from time to time, being like, got this, you're doing wonderful, you look beautiful. That kind of stuff is really helpful, I think, when you are feeling like some days you're like, very not yourself.
Well, my sister-in-law does a lovely thing. I like this one. So whenever there's a baby shower before, sometimes they have them after and whatever. Her favorite thing to do is to give a gift certificate to Lululemon for the mom rather than a bunch of stuff for the baby, because she's like, you know what? The mom is going to appreciate those leggings that she's going to be in and be comfortable. And I thought it was nice because it shows that same thing that you're saying, is see the mother, right? It's not only about the baby, and like, it's great. Yeah, babies are cute, but sometimes you got to see that there's this other thing happening, and it's going to be difficult for somebody as well. I think also we talked about previously the erosion of like physical space sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a lot of women out there that have unfortunately had this experience where you might have had a stranger approach you completely unsolicited and feel like it is an acceptable thing to touch your stomach.
Which would be super weird. Like if somebody just came up and touched my stomach right now, I'm not pregnant, by the way, I would be like, okay, that's super creepy because you haven't asked my permission.
You would never do that, right? Ever. But it's
Socially
this weird idea that like, oh, you're pregnant. So like you're somehow inviting this. And it's like, no.
So on that one, I think our hot tip on that one is ask first, please.
Ask first. Yes.
Yeah. If you're going to touch, and that's a generalized one. If you're going to touch anybody for any reason, pregnant or not, like maybe just seek some permission. The other one is, I think that you probably, not only with the physical unsolicited touch thing, you probably get a lot of unsolicited advice in general.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there. Going back to the misinformation, if you're a first-time mom, right, and you don't know what to expect, that can be really daunting, right? So you might be more vulnerable to going with something that is not necessarily the best option for you, but because it worked for somebody else and you're not sure what to expect.
When you say that, like what's in your mind with that? Like, can you give me a bit of an example?
I can give you an account of somebody personally I know that delivered their baby by themselves in their living room in a pool with no medical personnel. This is something they wanted to do, right? So
that was their birth vision.
Yeah, that was their birth vision, and completely unmedicated, that is wonderful. I'm not here to like shame anyone's birth plan, but having the background in nursing, I know that there are some things sometimes that you cannot anticipate, right? And if anything were to come up in the pregnancy that you have concerns about, it would be helpful to speak to a professional so they can help guide you to the most appropriate way. Because oftentimes there's this idea that if you go to the hospital to give birth, it's going to be impersonal, be really clinical, it's going to be a terrible experience. It's really not like that. So I think
for some people, and I think that it goes, and that's where like women are kind of stuck because they want this, I would say almost like tapping into a spiritual, like very evolutionary, holistic experience. And then there's the other part where you want to be safe. My little brother was born with a cord around his neck. If he wasn't in that operating room to get that off and like resuscitate him, he would have been dead.
Right.
There are these things, and not a doomsday scenario, but it's like, where do we create a space for women to say, I want this type of experience. I want it to be personal. I want it to be connected, but I also want it to be safe. And I think it's about bridging the two, because even as far as I've heard and seen right now, it seems like it's almost like this split ship where you kind of either get the full-on medical, which maybe does lack a little bit of the personal touches, or like the personal touches that somebody might want, or you get the full-on personal touches with maybe a lack of the medical insurance aspect. And maybe there's room for society to develop something that allows women to have both.
Absolutely. I think the sweet spot is always when you can find something that helps mitigate any risks you may have and also speaks to your values, right? And your morals and your preferences. And there are a lot of really good professionals out there that are willing to work with you. Yeah.
We're seeing more of midwives and doulas being involved in the hospital setting. So that is kind of an example of that bridging, right? Like you have two aspects of that. And the other thing is, I think that comes out with it, and this is where the anecdotal realities get a bit complicated, is whenever you're dealing with a service-oriented profession, whether it's birthing pool land or whether it's a doctor, you're dealing with that person's personality. So there's going to be a high level of variability to how that goes, right? Maybe you worked with professionals that you felt really connected to and comfortable, and maybe somebody else has had an experience where maybe that person wasn't like super on their game that day, or wasn't a good fit for the person. So maybe something else that we need is a way to screen for that fit for person to person, like someone that has like similar values to you, whether they're a doctor or a doula or midwife or.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to advocate for women to essentially advocate for themselves, right? If you feel something's not right, please speak up, ask if you feel like the professional that you're seeing is not right for you. There's no harm in asking for a referral. It's all good. The important thing is just that you maintain, those checkups, right? And your health up and make sure that, you're doing good. And there's lots of options out there. So you're not stuck with one.
Well, and I think that's the thing that sometimes we want to work on is creating that strength of voice where you go, okay, this gives me the heebie-jeebies. It doesn't feel right. I don't like it. Doesn't seem like it matches my values. Then we need to get people, and we can do this a couple of ways. It's one of the things that we do with our therapeutic process often is create that strength of voice so that people can speak up, so that women can say, I don't like this. It's not a fit. And not having to justify every single reason. Sometimes we just know, it's kind of like I always say to people, you meet people, right? You meet a new friend or whatever. And all of a sudden you get that thing where you're like, nah, not into it. You don't have to justify why you don't like that person or why they're not best friend material to this insane degree. So I don't think we have to do that with professionals or treating professionals either. You can just kind of get an ish and you're like, ish.
Yeah.
Not my favorite, right?
Yeah.
I think those things work a lot.
Most professionals too, if they're worth their salt, they're not going to have an issue with you either asking for a referral, because any professional cares about the people that they're treating, right? And they just want them to have the best care. So if that's not under them, it shouldn't be an issue with recommending somebody else.
Well, I think even you and I working in the clinical realm, we've had clients in front of us that I think, you or I would recognize they're probably better to work with one of our colleagues. Either the presenting concern fits better, the vibe fits better. It's when you're outcome focused, you want that person to have the best outcome. Whether it's a birth thing or whether it's a clinical outcome, that's the end point. And that's why you said it's a good professional that wants that versus somebody that's going to get offended. And if they are going to do that, right, assuming you're not being shitty about it, but
true.
Yeah, if you're going to be elegant about it, but yeah, I like that advocating for that and feeling like you can. I think that's good because you just said that would be the best thing is to give people permission to say, I don't think this is a good fit. On that point, how do you know? So you get the gut feeling, but what are some things that would indicate to someone whether their treating professional, whether it's an obs-gynae, like I said, or midwife, or their birth professional is going to be a good fit for them?
I think when you have somebody that is open to hearing what you want, right? And they're willing to work with you, they may have their own recommendations. And, I think it's important to ultimately yield sometimes to professionals because, hey, they are professionals, right? They've gone to school, some cases, decades. Right. They're very knowledgeable. So, but that doesn't mean that they need to come in and go and just shut everything down that you're wanting either. That's not really a good way of treating someone, right? So I think the balance is in between hey, okay, I hear what you're saying. I want to accommodate that based on my knowledge and what's going on in this situation. I would recommend we do this differently, right? We might want to avoid that. They'll do that.
So you're talking about facts versus judgments, right? So if they're giving you well, if you want this, these are the risk factors. This is versus I think, rather than I advise.
Right. Just like what we do in our sessions is we always inform the client what they can expect, right? We break down everything piece by piece. We share all those good, psychoeducation tidbits so that they can understand what's going on. And I think when you're pregnant, that is important information to have because you want to make sure you're doing whatever you can to keep yourself healthy, keep yourself feeling good, keep your baby healthy.
Well, you want the legitimate information in terms of, and depending on who you're talking to. So if you're talking to a medical professional, you just want the clean, what is the latest on X and Y concern that you're having in the same way that, like you said, when we're working with people, and it's funny because people actually come, and this is, I think, a gross misconception about psychologists is that we give opinions. Should I break up with her? I don't know. I'm not going to tell you, but what I can tell you is this is the pattern. This is the limiting belief. This is the activation. This is the trigger. This is how we clean that. This is likely what's happening on the other side. This is how that dynamic is created. You can top load people with context and then they can make an informed decision. Because I think at the end of it, whether we're talking about pregnancy or whether we're talking about therapy, you want people to be able to be empowered enough to come to their own conclusion about what is right for them with enough information to do so, which of course in the realm of pregnancy and birth is confusing because there's a lot of information out there. I'm sure it was easier before the internet.
Yeah. There's a lot of how pregnancy and birth is portrayed in just pop culture too, can be really misleading. Kind of like how psychology is too. Sometimes people come in with these ideas about what it is and you're like, oh, hell no.
You mean we just don't have people lay on couches and then tell them their dreams? You mean
That's
that?
right.
Mm,
Yeah.
damn.
That kind of.
That'd be an easy day in my world if I was just like, I think the shark eating your mother means that you wanted to have sex with her in childhood, says Freud. Like, no. But there is a lot of that too, right? So let's move on from pregnancy into, so we've got the birth plan stuff. So difference, we want like autonomy. Now let's move into the next part, which is the actual birth, which can have a lot of, like, that's a complicated realm. We see a bit clinically, we see as like, I think like everyone's heard in things, like we've seen really nice experiences where people really felt connected and their birth plan was aligned with them. And then we also get like full-blown birth trauma. Do you want to speak a little bit to what happens with the birth experience and how that interacts with this psychological aspect?
Yeah, the actual event of birth is probably one of the most monumental things a body can go through. It's a very all-encompassing kind of state of being during labor and birth, as probably most women can attest to. In terms of talking about just birth trauma, that can occur, unfortunately, with any individual, depending on if there's complications, if things are done, having to be done really kind of last minute, split second, and the mom doesn't get to be like an active part of the decision making. And
so when you're thinking about that, you're talking about like, you know, if there's a complication, all of a sudden you're rushed to do a C-section and it's not how you would have wanted it maybe, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So deviations from like the intended birth plan, birth vision, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Like I think anecdotally, you know, it is different from my experience because I did kind of like what you would call like the traditional hospital birth. Mm-hmm. But anecdotally, I know of individuals that have really wanted that home birth. They wanted it so bad. Things just go haywire a little bit and they're forced to kind of call that ambulance and get to the hospital in order to have a good outcome, right?
Yeah.
That can be really devastating.
They feel like they lose something, I think. Like they lost a piece of the experience. Is that what you tend to see?
Yeah,
clinically?
I think because we emotionally attach to that. We want that so bad. We want what's best for our babies too. I think good intentions and probably some interesting information about the impact on certain types of birth. I don't know.
Oh yeah, there's some like study stuff, and we'll talk about a little bit of the research. But I think also, you know, you're in this like very immersive physical experience, also having to make these calls, and then also worrying about this other little tiny creature that you're bringing into the world at the same time. Like that's a lot of overload for people, I think.
Yeah, you need to be in a place where you feel like you're supported, no matter what the birth plan is. Ultimately, that's something you want to make sure is kind of your priority.
So, question: when we're talking about like we're gonna go one step back again into like birth plan stuff. What do you think, like from a psychologist perspective, what would you think would be adaptive for people to start setting up so that they do have a good birth experience, even if things do go a bit haywire?
I think it's very important for moms to be flexible in their thinking, right? And ultimately, just remember what your priority is. Your priority is that you and your baby get through the birth unscathed. Everything else, we can go back, we can talk about, we can unpack, we can heal. That is ultimately probably
goal number one
priority. Yeah. So in times where you feel caught up maybe in like the disappointment, perhaps of finding out that you can't go with an original birth plan, try not to get hung up on that, as there's other things that could still be workable. So having that kind of flexible mindset is really helpful, because
so like removing a bit of that rigidity would be like step one. Like this would be the ideal, but if this happens, we're all so good. So like that's one. What's another thing that you would maybe say would be really helpful to set somebody up for a successful experience? Like I said, even if you can't control all of the variables.
Yeah, of course. I think, regular care, right, under a professional. So that could look like a few different things. Obviously, you want to keep up to date on all your appointments with prenatal appointments so that you and your doctors have a good line of communication, right? Mm-hmm. And also, I think it's helpful to have that support system and maybe, start talking to a professional as well. Therapists can be very helpful, I think, in helping somebody unpack those feelings, because it's complicated, right? You know in your heart that you want it to be a good outcome. You care about your health, you care about your baby's health, but you really had your heart set on doing it this way, and now you're being told that that's not a thing you can do anymore. And it feels silly sometimes, I think, for women to be like, oh, well, I shouldn't feel that way, right? I shouldn't be disappointed,
The shitting on yourself thing. But I think also not necessarily just a therapist, but also like if you want to work with another supportive person, like a doula, midwife, a really supportive obs-gynae, someone that really understands, because it can be a couple of different ways. And I kind of think it's good for people to do a little bit of self-awareness of like figuring out exactly what is the stress point. Like, is the stress point creating the birthing plan and needing someone to help with that? Or is the stress point like managing the emotions around it? Or is the stress point even like preparing your relationship to handle the transition or the birth or the pregnancy? So that might be, a bit of working together on your own, or a little bit of like couples sort of stuff or whatnot. So like bringing that professional in, so not thinking that you have to do it all by yourself would be one. Yeah. And then you mentioned support. So how do you prepare your supports then for this thing that you're going to need to access them for, or that you should access them a little bit for?
Right. And, obviously in an ideal world, right, we have that 9-month head start, right? So hopefully you're able to, work in knowing, right, who is your major support system. Ideally, I guess that would be your partner, probably, right? Is kind of your first line.
If you have one, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it speaks to like what we try to advocate for at Shift as well, is just having that really open communication, because the more honest you can be and vocal about your needs, right, and your limit, I think the more connected you'll be with that support system, and they'll feel like they have an idea of what you might need them to step in and advocate for. That
because I imagine that if you have someone, and that like might be like a partner or a best friend or whatever, and if you have that person and they're there and they're seeing you be anxious or worried or trying to plan some stuff, they often want to know what to do, right? It's like, give me the instruction. How can I help you? Like, how do we make this work? So kind of doing that. And I would say like one thing from a clinical perspective, if I see people having difficulty asserting that, then we go to therapy time. Because if you're having difficulty asserting your needs or organizing your voice in that regard, you want to hit that then so we can clean it. That's what we would do typically with that. Because if you don't have that voice, and I think like the theme of what you said to this point is that voice, whether it's in advocacy for your professional or with your partner, that voice and having a strength of voice to assert what you need is the major protective factor.
Yeah.
Or a major one.
Yeah, one thing that we might have lost a little bit in kind of just modern times, particularly COVID as well, probably impacts this, is just a sense of community. There's this idea now, I think, too, that pregnant women, they're not getting the village they used to get, right? Yes. So they're not getting that village during pregnancy, and they're not getting that village after either in some cases. So knowing that you have at least a couple people, kind of core support.
They can hold the baby when you shower kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, well, I think we talked about this a little bit because, I'm a big village person. Like I'm a big, like I would say my core value is connective relationships. Like that's like the biggest thing, followed by autonomy. I've blah, blah, blah with you about this a long time. One of the reasons for that, particularly around pregnancy, is I told you a story when I was living over in Abu Dhabi. I was very interested in how they treated mothers after birth. So not only would they top load it with like lots of support and yay, but when she would give birth, and again, remember, this is like a very traditional Bedouin society. So I'm not saying like do it exactly like this. Just an interesting perspective. So when she gave birth, then they would kick that guy out of the house for a month. And then all the aunties and grandmas, sometimes like 30 people, would move into the house. And for 30 days, drip dry later, this new mama would have, someone to hold the baby, someone to bathe the baby, someone to tell her how to suckle, how to whatever, and to feed her and treat her. Like, it was mind blowing to me that was the level of support. And you don't have those instances of postpartum anxiety, depression, psychosis. They don't happen in the same levels in those societies. I think what you're saying is probably a lot of that And that's just the post-birth. We'll get into why that's also protective later. It's a very interesting thing because so right after I got back, my one Bedouin friend there her name is Arwa, most precious person on the planet. She had her baby. So everyone moved in and the amount of ritual and support was just insanity level. Like everyone literally just stops working we're just taking care of her. Can you imagine? You have a brand new baby at home and you have 30 people that their entire thing is to pass on the knowledge and to sit with you or to let you go sleep or to, ease your physical pains with turmeric paste or whatever. It was mind blowing. And 6 months later, I was back in Canada and one of my girlfriends had just given birth and she was in her apartment and she's a single mom as well. So she was in her apartment all day. And I remember one day she called me up crying maybe 2 weeks after and she'd gotten the stomach flu really badly. And she had this baby that she has to feed every 2 hours, but she was like lying on the bathroom floor sick. We've all had one of those and terrified because there is no one there to help her. And you go, those two realities, there's something very, very different, I think, about what our structures should be. It's a very clear picture.
I think, it's really important not to ever discount the impact of offering like practical support. So obviously the emotional support is huge, but like you mentioned about, the families in Dubai, right? Like having that person there that's prepping meals, helping, to remedy things, right? Teaching something, like those are all really good practical ways of supporting a mom. As opposed to just being like, well, in my, we do it like this here. Like, yeah, just kind of like noise, right? As opposed to like doing. So, that can mean a huge thing. I know because when you have a baby, your needs don't stop. You still need to eat. You need to sleep. You need to bathe. You need to have those needs met so that you can be there for your child.
And concentrate 100%. On that bond, developing that bond without having to worry about I don't have dinner, I haven't eaten, or just even being able to enjoy it. And I think so much of new moms in our society now, because of the lack of social connectedness, they don't have those very functional supports. And we call them like practical functional supports. So if dinner's in the oven, the house is reasonably cleaned, someone can hold the baby while you go shower. So then later you can I think that's definitely I would say first line of defense because we don't always know how to emotionally support somebody, but at least that gives them a bit more bandwidth to connect emotionally and feel cared for and loved.
Oh, absolutely. And it is meaningful, right? Like I can't tell you how thrilled I would have been if somebody had dropped like a lasagna off.
Okay,
like
well, if you do baby number 2, I'll get your food done.
Yeah. Do not have to worry about cooking. This is great, or somebody that's like, hey, don't need anything. Don't want to bother you. I just came by to
clean up around and
clean your house.
Put in a load of laundry
and don't mind me.
It was funny because that day with that friend of mine, I went over there and she's like Gatorade and soda crackers. Took the baby out for a bit of a 45-minute walk because it's a tiny, tiny baby. And then, stop by the grocery store, grab some frozen meals, put them in there, threw in some the little onesie. How many do they wear a day? It seems like 500. But anyway, throw those in, put her in bed. And I think in those moments, but I think we need to know why, because I was like at crisis point. And like I said, the Abu Dhabi girls, that crisis point would not have occurred. So we need to start doing something a little bit differently. Not only to support the new moms, but even in a couple, it's still a lot of work and a lot of shock to the system, even if there's 2 of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like one other thing I wanted to speak to just on this topic is you can kind of see there's an example of this. I don't butcher it, but I don't know if you've heard of this. There was a woman in the States. She has 5 children and she actually had run out of formula and she called 911. And that kind of speak to like
the level.
What do I do? It's 3 a.m. I have a hungry baby. I also have these 4 young children. I'm by myself.
I can't leave.
I can't. Like, what can I do? And this poor woman, I mean, she did get a lot of like harsh criticism for doing that, but
what was she supposed to do? Like leave the other 3. There is some, and I think that's when we also get into, and we'll talk about this a little bit more one day, but money used correctly makes it easier, but not everybody has that ability, right? Like if you can't call a babysitter or you don't have that partner or you don't have the family that lives in the same city, very challenging, right? So I think it's looking at that and kind of recognizing, I think a good thing for us to do that we can do, the people that aren't the new moms or aren't the new dads, that we can do is start looking around with some compassion. It's kind of like you shovel the old guy's walk. Well, if the new lady over there's got a baby, like not only does she maybe want you to bring the lasagna, but maybe she just wants a human adult to talk to for like 5 minutes. Often, and we're talking about different circumstances in which it's difficult. And it is difficult, I think, across the board. Some people find it delightful. Then it gets into difficult. Then it sometimes gets into what we would start to class like not. Now we're into clinically maladaptive.
Right. Absolutely.
Not that that's not maladaptive. That's not fun, definitely.
Yeah,
but when we get into maladaptive, now we're looking at, maybe talk to me about what differentiates like a difficult time from now we're looking at a clinical concern. How do we spot that and support it? Because I think often it's not the new mom themselves that spots it. Sometimes, but often not.
A little quick stats about mental health in pregnancy and postpartum. So, the research suggests that about 1 in 5 women are going to experience some type of mental health concern. So that right there kind of tells us that, this is not a rare thing. Like this is something that should be addressed and women should be educated on so that, yes, they know kind of what their risk factors might be. And also just to kind of break down the stigma.
Well, and then we should know, we should be able to spot then. If it's 1 in 5, I mean, I've got more than 5 girlfriends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like one of them is probably, and then maybe I will be able to see that. So break it down for us. Like, what are we looking for?
Yeah. So in terms of, just knowing normal versus maybe reaching for some help, you want to know your risk factors, which we can get into as well. But there's a couple things about post-birth, knowing that it's a huge monumental shift, not only in your body, but in your mind. We know that it's normal to have some stress. Mm-hmm. One of the things that can occur it's funny because it's always described as this is somehow outside the norm, but there's a condition that's called the baby blues. Mm-hmm. This is something that it's common in up to 85% of the population of new moms.
So tell us a bit about like, what is that and what causes it in your estimation? Like, what does it look like? Like if we were going to look at like what the baby blues would look like, what does that look like?
For sure. So typically it looks like, crying spells. You're going to like maybe not have a great appetite, difficulty sleeping, feeling sad, feeling nervous, feeling overwhelmed. You might have a little bit of mood swings. But hey, fun fact, after you give birth, your body rapidly starts going back to pre-pregnancy hormone level. So you can imagine just that huge shift, right? So you're going to be maybe a little bit cranky, maybe a little bit teary.
Well, you made a human, so I feel like you can have a nap then and be a grump. Yeah. But also, we're also combining this with a significant amount of sleep stress often.
Sleep deprivation is a huge thing. I have to say, even from my own experience, like I knew it was going to be a thing, but the extent of it, and I am a person that loves my sleep. I always have been a good sleeper. And so I thought, like something will just kick in and it'll be like magic and I'll be able to get up and have the energy at 3 a.m. to go feed my kid.
So what do we do? What do we do about that? Because I think that's a fairly common one, right? Because like they don't come out and sleep through the night, as far as I understand. Like, I mean, if I ever do it, I'm going to fully expect that happens. And you'll be like, pat me on the head and be like, that's cute. But so it's not likely, right? And I think like how often, for us, like complete idiots in terms of babies, how often do they get up? Like first 3 months, like what is their thing? Because they're too tiny to not eat for a long time, right?
Exactly. Like I will try and stay in my lane on this as much as I can, but just relaying the information that I had from professionals, it was advised to me that it's like, you want to make sure they're eating every 3 hours. And this is kind of like the norm. You may be wanting to wake them up, seems counterintuitive, but it's important, right?
Well, they're too tiny to like sustain them. They're too tiny to sustain themselves through like an entire 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever.
Exactly.
So we're getting sleep interrupted. Plus we've got all this hormone shift. Plus we've got some like pressure and, like a crazy different thing. And here's one thing that I think in my work with new moms comes up more and more often, especially moms that are professionals and they have a nice, like, they've got a nice little like social relationship at work and now they're not. And now they're just by themselves with this small person that doesn't let them sleep, and I'm not to say, like, obviously it's delightful. Their hands are super cute, but they've also lost a lot of their social connectivity because in our day to day, and lost a lot of routine, and then put some sleep disruption on top. And then we've got some like physiological changes, and then. So you're layering like multiple stressors. And if we took out the baby thing and layered that in any other world, we're probably going to see some stuff, which is why I think you were saying around 50 to 85% of women experience some of that.
Yeah. And this is all normal, right? This is not pathological. However, right, based on, the severity of the symptoms, like that's the other thing you'll notice with baby blues, it is different than postpartum depression because the symptoms are more mild. They're a lot more mild to moderate. So when you think about appetite loss, when you think about crying or, irritability, trouble sleeping, that's not going to be at the same level it would be if you had postpartum.
Can you give us a bit of an indication of, from what you're saying, like the baby blue sounds terrible. I don't want that. So give me a little bit of an indication of where is the tipping point between baby blues is a struggle. This is like something where we're adjusting to a new normal. Like I think like when I first moved out and I out of the house and I realized there's this thing called like laundry and you have to cook and grocery and you take your garbage. Like that's an adjustment period kind of thing. Exactly. Versus when we get into full on clinical non-formation maladaptive structures. Yeah. So where is the tipping point? What's it look like?
Right. So the important thing to remember about the baby blues is that it typically only lasts around 2 weeks after birth. Okay. So if you're experiencing these symptoms, far after that point, that's when you may want to talk to somebody, reach out. That could be your partner at first, right? Just to talk about what you're experiencing. The situations, if it is postpartum depression, are going to be more intense. You might have some scary thoughts, right? You might start thinking that there might be some suicide ideation going on in there, just extreme guilt, extreme feelings of worthlessness, just this idea that you're not the right mother for this child.
When we say extreme, and we know with anything in the psychology realm, everything is on this like nice continuum. So we've got the baby blues at kind of one end, or just like transitional difficulties, which is to be expected. Mm-hmm. And we have some stuff in the middle that are probably things like, like not wanting to wake up or hypersleep or, feeling really blue and blah and unmotivated all day, maybe getting to the middle. And then at the other side of it, now we've got like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I feel disconnected from my child, from my partner, from everyone. Yep. I'm not important. I'm failing at this. Like those types of limiting belief conversations probably coming up more and more. Is that kind of what it looks like?
Definitely probably those feelings of worthlessness, I'm not good enough, I'm wrong. All these things can kind of cause that spiral, I think.
So let's pretend you're somebody that has a second child, you've had the baby blues and it moved into kind of a postpartum depression. What's the likelihood that we're going to see that in subsequent pregnancies then? Because that might be something people worry about, right?
Yeah. And unfortunately, there is 30 to 50% increase in your risk for postpartum depression in subsequent pregnancies if you did develop it in your first pregnancy. So it's not guaranteed, but it is, if you have experienced that, it is very important that you have that support in place to help you, because unfortunately you are at a higher risk to develop it in any kind of subsequent pregnancy.
So we just want to prepare it. Kind of like if you're at high risk of a family history of heart disease, you want to get extra healthy.
For sure.
And so on and so on. So is there anything that we can do? And we'll talk about postpartum psychosis and anxiety as well. Maybe actually let's talk about the difference between depression, psychosis, and anxiety. And then let's talk about what we can do going back in time in this conversation. What can people do to kind of remove that or mitigate that a little bit? Because I think that there's usually some stuff that we can do to get in front of it. If it's like likely, or we know maybe some presupposing factors, et cetera. We'll get into that a little bit. But what differentiates postpartum depression from postpartum anxiety? Or is it different at all?
Yeah. So there's a few, unfortunately, different concerns that can come up. So there's, like you mentioned, there's postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and postpartum psychosis. So postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, obviously a little bit different. Like we touched on the symptoms that may develop in postpartum depression. Fun fact, also, this can occur in fathers and adoptive parents as well, which adds kind of another layer to this.
Well, that's kind of neat. And I think that's probably not spoken about often.
No, I think, definitely there's room for psychoeducation and supports for fathers, right? Or partners, right? Because they are going through a huge shift in their lives as well.
So do you think then that the postpartum depression, anxiety, obviously there's the physiological factors with the hormones, et cetera, but do you think it's a lot resultant from the change to lifestyle and like moving into a different stage, tasks to perform, et cetera?
It's tough, right? Because it's hard to know for sure. Like obviously, depending on what's going on in your life, you could be a little bit more at risk for developing it, right?
Multifactorial.
Fortunately, yes, exactly. Yeah, there's lots to consider there. And so if you have a high amount of risk factors, though, it's not a guarantee you'll get that. But unfortunately, it could put you more and make you more vulnerable to it. There's also, the heritability factor as well, right? Someone in your family has struggled with that. You may be more at risk for developing it yourself.
I think like one of the things I've recognized in my client populations is if you have an anxiety or mood disorder before, whether it's before pregnancy or birth or like as a partner to somebody, like you're going to, that's a risk factor in itself. So probably one thing I would think that would mitigate that would be treating that as much as you can before, like addressing it. Because we know anxiety and depression are actually like very treatable things in many cases, right? Because it's like, you don't have to hang out, just in case you were listening and you have that, you don't have to hang out with it. It's not necessarily like a 5-second fix, but we play with that and remove it all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so I think that would at least like move the foundation down to a lower base level. There might be some anxiety still, but it's less. So if you think about like hitting a red line when you're speeding, if it's, kind of work with it like that. Am I on the right track with that, Sarah?
Yeah. In terms of tools, you're thinking to kind of mitigate or balance the...
Just thinking about like creating like a strong foundation. Like we know that there's a couple things, maybe we'll get into this after we talk about psychosis a little bit, but things that set people up for success in any transition. And that might be retirement or birth or whatnot. But tell me a little bit about the anxiety and the psychosis aspect of postpartum.
Course, yeah. So the anxiety, obviously some anxiety is going to be normal, right? It's expected.
Yeah.
It's a little bit anxious to suddenly have this tiny little fragile person that you are now in charge of.
Probably makes you care though. You're like, you're not just like, well, whatever,
Yeah, no, you're very switched on, right? But but anxiety can show up as being irritable. Again, it can interfere with sleeping, relaxing. You're going to have muscle tension probably. You might have issues with like your focus and concentration. You might have panic attack, which can be very scary if that's not something you've had to deal with before. And
rumination.
You might find yourself avoiding things.
Tell me a little bit about that. Like what kind of things or like how does that, I'm assuming it presents differently for different people.
I think a lot of moms can relate to that nervousness around introducing the baby to like a big crowd of people for the first time, right? Because for those of us that are lucky enough to have that village, right? It's exciting. Everyone wants to come and see the baby and hold the baby. But when you are kind of like just fresh out of the womb, you just want to make sure that everybody is doing what they can to stay clean and
vaccinations was a thing too. Like I know one of my girlfriends, she's very wary about like whether you've had yours or not because she's in the medical profession. She worries about that. The other thing, like with the COVID thing, obviously that's a concern.
Oh yeah.
And the other one is I've seen like a lot of new moms worry about leaving the baby ever. That first dinner that you go out or that first hour that you leave or the first overnight, that becomes like a very large source of anxiety for a lot of people, I think. How old was Archer before you like left him for a whole afternoon or something like that?
I was back at work, not at shift, about 4 weeks after I gave birth. So quite early. I was fortunate that my partner was able to. So I didn't have that same fear. I still struggled with that, but I was his dad, so it's okay. In terms of just somebody other than immediate family, I think probably wasn't until, maybe close to 18 months before I felt like, so no date night for us.
Well, no, but that's the thing. Like my sister-in-law was just over and she's like, this is the first time that we've been out without him.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like 8 months or 7 months. I'm terrible with like ages, but it's interesting because it does lend itself. And I think this is again, that difference between the North American culture and some of the more collectivist cultures. It lends itself to this like hyper dependency on one or two people in the family household, which is super great, wonderful, really hard, though, psychologically on people, right? Because I'm sure at some point in that 18 months, you would have been like, yes, I would love a date night or love a night to just not, or just a hotel where I could just nap without a small person crawling on me.
I would like to wear clothes that don't have barf or any other bodily fluids on me.
Or just a bit of quiet. Just please shut up. I think one thing, if you ever live with a romantic partner, I think there's this beautiful moment. And it happened for me yesterday. And this is terrible. I'm so glad that my husband never listens to my podcasts or is in session with me because I throw him under the bus all the time. He's a gem. I love him. But you know that moment where they're like, I'm going to be out all day. And you're like, because there's an ease that you get from just like having a small opportunity to just be with yourself, focused on yourself only. And 18 months is a really long time to not have that kind of moment.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be like the other thing I think is breeding a social environment where you are okay with having somebody step in so that you can go and have a nap, go for a walk, get your nails done, whatever the thing is that like fills you up. And I think creating more opportunities like that for moms is how you support them as well. And dads as well, because they're dealing with like new baby, sleep deprivation, and mom. So there's like the whole, the familial structure, I guess, like everyone in it. And one thing we haven't touched on is not only the like moms and the dads, but also like the other little siblings that might be in that house, because that's a big transition for them as well, right?
Yeah, huge, right? So that kind of speaks to what we talked about earlier, whereas like life doesn't stop just because the new baby arrives, right? So that kind of speaks to how you can support moms and families, right? Is maybe you can do a bit of childcare for them, right? You can be there. You can help the parents when maybe mom's giving birth, right? You can look after her other children, having that support system, knowing that your other kids are well looked after while you're,
I know one thing we did for like one of mine is he was really not happy about the fact that he was getting another baby. He's the baby. So we got him like a big brother gift, right? Like, so having like fun things like that. And that's something that parents can do, or like other people around. And he's like, wow, you're a big brother now. Here's your like thing, acknowledgement on different levels. So it's understanding that when you bring a new person, whether it's a baby or anyone, into a familial dynamic, you're going to shift everything around, and there's going to be a bit of change management that's necessary, and being really proactive about that. And I think that's, again, where some professionals can come into it to try to help you script it a little bit and get excited. And not only professionals, but like even a good friend. You can be like, how would I handle this? Or how, you and I have talked about different ways to mitigate various things and so on. We're going to talk a little bit about, so we've got through birth, there's her pregnancy all the way through birth. And now we've got new baby. We're into transitions. We've got a little bit of the psychosis piece. That's a bit different now, because now we're into capital clinical concern.
Yeah. Postpartum psychosis is actually classified as a medical emergency. So that kind of just speaks to this, like it
severity.
Is a serious matter. Thankfully, though, very rare. Only about 1% of all moms are going to develop it. So it's very...
What's it look like?
Yeah, it's not subtle, right? So I think this is the thing that's important to recognize is if you suspect somebody's having postpartum psychosis, it might be because, they're engaging in some irrational or like bizarre behaviors, right? So
it's like seeing stuff that's not there kind of thing?
Yeah, like hallucinations and delusions, are a piece of that. So that might mean, like talking to people that don't seem to be there, hearing voices, seeing things where there isn't any, and just really extreme paranoia.
Like a complete break from reality. Like stuff is happening that's not happening, and very uncharacteristic behavior then for the person.
Yeah, you are disoriented from reality, confused. You are not yourself at all.
So we've seen that. You've seen that before. When you have that actively in front of you, how do you approach it? Because I know we talk about like you said, like this is a medical emergency. Obviously, like get them to a hospital in front of a psychiatrist. But in that moment, like how do you approach somebody to get them into that? Like what should we do then?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously it's different depending on like if they're trying to harm someone or whatever, restrain. But if someone's say talking about at that level where that they're saying things that are illustrating a complete departure from reality, they're of no risk to themselves physically or someone else, because that's a different call. But how would you approach it, either in your own mind or with them,
yeah, with postpartum psychosis, that is all about, I think, being very transparent, very gentle, very supportive, and not judgmental. Right. Your end goal is to get this person help. So if they're not necessarily into it, you may have to call for some, reinforcements. You might need that if you can't talk them into it yourself, but just basically showing them that you care, showing them that support and that love, and not being judgmental, and knowing that they're going through something that they can't control.
So more comforting. We deal with this with like dementia or delirium as well. You don't try to rationalize that. If they're like, there's pink fluffy bunny rabbits over there.
Exactly. No, we go with whatever's the situation, right? You got to meet them where they're at. And if, like you say, if they're seeing little bunnies bouncing down the road, let's follow those, honey. Will you come for a drive with me? Let's follow them.
Yeah. And that's like, we'll talk about that later. Like maybe come in the car and that sort of thing. Sometimes, obviously, people that are in, like if you're the partner of somebody that's experiencing that, it is very disturbing to watch, because a lot of times I think with postpartum psychosis and extreme depression and anxiety as well, there'll be things that involve the baby. Like I don't want the baby here. The baby needs to go. I'm going to put the baby outside. Like I've heard that one, minus 22. And she's like, this baby I don't like him. I'm going to put him outside in the yard.
Yeah. And with psychosis, that kind of thing, unfortunately, could happen, because with those delusions, with that paranoia and that disorientation, some people might even think like, this isn't my baby. I don't know who this is. Like,
or the baby can take on a different persona as well.
Exactly. This baby is evil, right? There's a lot of unfortunate cases of, it's not a lot, but
no, it's a rare thing. And I think that's why we want to talk about it, is like, it's a very, very rare thing. But the thing is, because it's a rare thing with a very significant consequence often, we just want to make sure that we can spot it, right? Which is why I think you're bringing this up now.
Yeah. Essentially, one of the other symptoms that's pretty pronounced in psychosis is like a refusal, or like a very severe decrease in appetite, or just refusing to eat altogether, refusing to sleep, and extreme, irritability,
agitation, pacing, like they're strange physical behaviors. Cycling from like being maybe almost like giddy and euphoric to like just full on despair in a very short time. So like massive mood liability, but
huge.
And also I think the biggest one with psychosis in general, or probably any of the postpartum conditions, but psychosis particularly, and this is not just related to like postpartum psychosis, it's a massive and marked quick departure from normal functioning. Like if you see a normal, like this person, and then all of a sudden they're acting in this like very strange way, trust that. And no one's going to get mad at you for being overly cautious. Right. And I think that's what we want to, there's this thing around any mental health thing where people often, we see this with partners, especially when there's a new baby in the house, they get worried. So they don't want to say anything. And then that doesn't help. And it's quite dangerous also, not only for like the physical sense of the baby, but also for the partner, because now you have something going wrong in the house and you're going to shut it down and hide it instead of accessing appropriate resources and help without judgment. Like we want to remove that. Like if you get the heebie-jeebies that something's not right, generally it's because something's not right. And if it's your partner, you tend to know that person. So you'll be able to see the discrepancies in functioning quickly. So count on you with that one. That's one of the things I would say to my clients always.
Yeah, absolutely. Lean into what you know, right? And just speaking to what you said, your partner, right? Obviously there's going to be some changes, but what is beyond the line of normal for them.
Even
right?
like, so I have a best friend. We're like best friends, like grade 3 level best friends, like always.
BFF.
She can phone. Oh yeah. Like it's stupid. Like glitter. What does he call? Oh, my husband calls me like the glitter idiots when we're like in our full best friendy mood. He's like, oh, the glitter idiots are out today, in a cute way. But I can tell from the tone of her voice when she says hello, if she's okay or if something's bothering her. We know this enriched data from voice recognition, from our facial movements. I think Gottman found more than 100,000 facial micro movements. So when your partner, when you think something's off, especially after something that's very challenging, like having a baby, transitioning the household, we really want to be like, okay, let's be overly cautious, not try to scale it back and whatnot. Because it is a bit of a difficult thing to, I think, talk about with people. So let's pretend that there's some post-psychosis, anxiety, depression, something not right with your partner, but it's not right on the level that we're going to go to the emergency room. What would you suggest for a partner to do in that circumstance? You're like, something's getting odd.
So in that case, you may want to just kind of assess the situation, right? So when you suspect your partner is struggling, ask them directly, right? And keep in mind that you may get a straight answer. You may get the, canned, I'm fine, but know the difference, right? And so that's when it's a little bit on you as the partner to want to maybe do a little bit of detective work and be like, where does she seem to be struggling, right? Is it she needs more sleep? So maybe I can get up during the night, right? And do a couple feedings. Does she need help with other tasks around the house? Maybe, because depending on how you give birth, right, that can impact your recovery, your mobility, all that stuff. So, is she managing?
Is she eating?
Feeling okay? Yeah. What does she need? Is she getting enough to eat? Yeah. And is she getting things that just help her feel like a human, right?
Well, knowing your partner before too, right? Like if you have a really extroverted partner and then you put them in a box away from people,
right?
They probably just need to talk to their friend versus like someone who likes to meditate a lot or whatever. So kind of having those things.
Yeah. Like, does she need a break? And sometimes you're not going to get that response like, yes, I do, right? But you can still show up and maybe,
I think it's a better likelihood if you have specific offerings, right? Like, hey, can I take baby so you can have a nap? Can I take baby so you can have a shower? Can I go, like, if you have, like what you're saying, like you map
an appointment for your nails, right?
Or,
I need you an appointment for a massage. Like,
or I bought you this great book. Please go, like, Like, but knowing, and so that knowledge, and that is not necessarily like the partner either. It might be the best friend or the mom or whoever coming in and going like, I know this person. I'm going to take a couple threads out and I'm going to figure out what they are probably lacking based on who they are.
Yeah. And I think it's just, like you said, knowing your partner really well and trying to be in tune.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it around on you, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do 2 months post-birth. What would you, besides the lasagna, and I'll say one thing, like I make a mean damn lasagna. I'm going to give you one just for funsies. We'll do it. Okay. It's like my best thing ever.
I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, it's happening. It'll be the podcast gift. Okay. It'll be my thank you for coming on the podcast. But what would you have most wanted aside from, some when to take care of like the functional food cleaning kind of aspects?
Just feeling like a person in the world, because from my experience, it was in that box, right? It was like that. I have to find time to shower. I am, breastfeeding and all of that good stuff. I would like to have an excuse to put on clean clothes and put on makeup and style my hair.
What would that have looked like for you? It's like someone coming over and being like, hey, we got a lunch date and a sitter or husband's home, and like what would that manifestation be? Because I think as like a person that doesn't have kids, you also get hesitant to take somebody away from the new baby. So there's like a bit of a line there too, right?
Yeah, I think, like, of course, everyone's different, right? But I think, little short breaks away, just that feeling. It kind of might sound silly, but even just going to the grocery store by yourself, right? Like getting dressed and, doing your hair and makeup and just going to the grocery store by yourself and be like, I'm just grabbing the stuff I need and driving in your car, and knowing that, your partner's got it at home, like everything.
One of my girlfriends, she would not, I knew that going out was like not a thing. So I was like, I want you to get dressed up. I'm going to bring lunch by. We're going to sit on the porch with the baby monitor. Husband and baby are in the house. We're on the porch. I told him, I was like, don't bug her unless I don't know what baby crisis is, but like, unless there's a baby crisis. Yeah. But it was enough away that she could feel like that, but didn't have to bridge that gap of actually leaving. Because baby was like really, really little and just wasn't there yet. So I think like maybe meeting people where they are with what they kind of need and mitigating that a bit.
Totally. And being flexible with moms, right? So that's where friends can step into is try not to take it ever personally, because you're not going to be the same person with your friends after having a kid as you were before. I know it's like you try. Like I've been on the other end of that. Like one of my very good friends, she had her daughter many years ago, and I was still in that not even a
Like,
blip on my
going to
radar.
restaurants,
Kids,
is it like a new thing?
yeah. And, it was an adjustment even from that side. We have a very strong friendship. So ultimately, we came through it, but it was hard, I think, on her end, is feeling like that pressure to still kind of be available, but yet obviously not being able to be this available in the same way.
But that's why I think like a bit of creative ideas around like really, really help. So we'd normally go to this fancy restaurant, but one of my girls just like she has a toddler. She's very bonded to the toddler, blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
And I was like, well, let's not do the fancy restaurant then. Like, let's turn the hot tub into a plunge pool and we'll cut melon slices up and we'll like hang out on the deck then.
Totally.
So creating those adaptations so that you can maintain the social connectivity and also make it easier and more accepting for that new mom to not feel like she's giving up everything or is imposing on people for that.
Exactly. Because chances are she is dying to spend time with you. I know, like, I want to see my friends so much, and I cherish that time I had with them. And
what do you think stopped you from seeing them?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, it was just that kind of like kind of what we touched on earlier was that whole just sort of like paradigm shift of,
like, new game.
I'm a parent now. What? Like, oh my goodness. Okay, I have not been able to keep a houseplant alive, but I am now in charge of a human being. All right. So that's, just that kind of like, I need to figure it out.
I think that's when
my new normal.
Well, that's when you go into like social dynamics as well. Like if you're the kind of mom that, if you're first to market, like if you're the first one that has kids, or like if no one in your life has children, like no one in my life has kids aside from like my sister-in-laws, which is great. But like, I don't know, I'm friends with too many gay boys or something. No one has babies. It would be such a disruption to our social milieu. Or if you're the first one, right? Like you might be the older one, the first one to get married, whatever, or not. Also like, but that's double hard because then now you're pushing a social change in the group, and the group might still be like, let's go to the patio. Woo. And you're like, I can't bring a 12-month-old there successfully.
Yeah, totally. And that's pretty much nailing it, right? Like it's just about what am I comfortable with? What is realistic? Because I mean, those kind of like cheesy jokes about like bringing 3 bags of stuff for like the kids. You probably see those before versus after kids. Oh, we're just going to
here's my clutch and here's my like
backpack. Like, I mean, I literally look like I was probably going on an overnight trip when I'd go out with my son for any extended period of time.
I'm backpacking later in the River Valley. But you know what? One thing that was notable to me is there's also a different perspective on children here. Like again, with the Abu Dhabi thing, when I was over in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, they're very like kid friendly. So you could be like in a Michelin star restaurant and the servers would be like picking them up, or you'd be whatever, or somebody would be screaming. Like didn't matter. Here, people are more apologetic about their children and they feel more like they're burdening other people for having them around, which I think is an attitude we have to change. If you're sitting on a patio and there's a kid there and he's fussing and he throws off cutlery or whatever, who cares? There, they'd rush and go get him like a little strawberry, to like a totally different perspective on children. Here, it's like they're often in public in certain circumstances, like an inconvenience, which I think doubles down, makes it very difficult for the parents because they're like, oh, sorry. Which in the cultural dynamic, you have to be, but it doesn't make it easy to continue your life. It's like a huge departure, as you're saying, right? You're like, hey, this is me before, and then now I have to go do this after, which is exclusionary kind of.
I think, you touched on something that is something that happens in our society, which is, I think, a little bit of carryover maybe from a couple generations ago, where this idea that, kids are like little adults, kids should be seen and not heard, right? And that's just not the way it is, right? Like that's
not so far as I've seen. Like, I mean, that'd be great if you could have that little like baby Napoleon that just sits there going like,
for sure.
Yes, mommy. Yeah. But just as far as I've seen, it doesn't work like that though.
Exactly. Like kids are like walking walnut, right? Yes. So, I mean, we cannot reason with a walnut. We love them. They're great. But yeah, you cannot reason with them.
And just sidebar, when Sarah says walnut, do you want to describe walnut? Because like we talk about it in our internal, this is an inside joke, inside language for us. But when you say walnut, what do you mean?
Oh, yes. So in the walnut, we talk about that a lot in our protocol. That is where the good old emotions of those pesky limiting beliefs tend to live. And so when those little guys get activated, it kind of makes our brains kind of go into that good old fight or flight and trying to keep us safe and away from pain and all that good stuff.
And that's why they melt down when they're tired, right? There's
Oh,
like
for
my
sure.
walnut says I'm sleepy.
I'm flooded, therefore I'm going I'm tired, so I'm going to scream on the floor until you understand that I'm tired.
The anger level of the walnut is funny. I was talking to my little nephew. He's super cute, but his mom was cooking. So she had like a pot of boiling water. He had his little play kitchen. So he wanted her to give him a pot of boiling water in the play kitchen. Obviously, that wasn't something she was going to do.
Nope.
So then he drags the play kitchen all the way to the door and he's like, well, then I don't want it. I don't want it. Get out. And I was like, well, that's extreme. That's like me. That's like my teenage version of myself and without any constraint. So there are a bunch of walnuts and you bring the walnut to dinner, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's an adventure, right?
It is.
That's where, again, that flexibility and tempering expectations can be like a huge difference between mental well-being and like total stress.
Well, and we can do a little bit with mental flexibility in a couple of ways. Obviously, like therapy, like what we do, that'd be a thing. A little bit of medication. There are certain circumstances in which pharmaceutical interventions are helpful. There's a lot in which they are not. So it wouldn't be like our straight go-to, right? But if we're talking about like in the psychosis one, definitely that is something that a psychiatrist should manage because it's that crisis level and be out of the realm of what we do. The depression and anxiety for postpartum or the stress management during pregnancy or the preparing for it, that is all something that like therapy helps with really nicely. Not only in the way that we're going to like think about it, plan it, create that flexibility. We're also going to look at the limiting beliefs that are going to inhibit having that flexibility. So anytime we get like too much rigidity, it's going to be a problem. Anytime we have too much rumination or obsessional thoughts about, and everyone does have them to some degree, like, oh, I worry about this. We want to remove those. Those are like limiting belief land. So you can get that away. The other one that we touched on was some stuff around boundaries, right? Being able to advocate for yourself and also set those boundaries. Like, don't touch my stomach. Also, don't tell me how to have birth if I've done my research and I know what I want. Those types of things. When we've got the eclipsing of voice and now you're doing what other people are telling you to do, you don't agree with it. There's usually a physical feeling with that, or anything that inhibits your ability to take care of your physical needs, sleep, or put yourself into like a safe situation, etc. Anything that gets involved with those things, then we're going to want to do a little bit of like therapy around that and get you out of that situation. But let's switch over just to close on. That's what the new mom, potential mom would do. Let's close on what all of us in their life should do. So you said a couple things and I'm going to run through them and then you're going to like clip on if I miss anything screwed up and you fill it in. Okay. One is like actually directly ask that person, what do you need? What is important? Funny, they're actually a great resource if you speak to them directly, right? The other thing is like check your own biases. You don't need to tell them what they should do. You can tell them in more of a gestalt way, which is like, my experience was X. Like that's helpful to people to understand your experience without having that other layer of, and then you should do this the same way. So if I say like, well, when I or when I was thinking about like, that's helpful because you're giving them some context without the like judgment thing. And we talked about helping and supporting moms in practical ways. Like I told you, like lasagna. Baby number 2, you'll have 40 lasagnas or like we'll change it up a little bit just so you're not bored. But giving them like some help and support in ways that are basic that you understand. Hey, how about I take a night shift? I'll just come watch TV and hold baby. You can sleep for a few hours or I'll get someone to come help you with the house. Really practical base level things because that's what falls apart a little bit when you introduce a new tiny human in, because they're assholes. That's what I've learned also in this podcast. I like them.
They're cute assholes.
Well, they have tiny little hands and they're tiny little fingers. They're largely pricks is what I understand. Like they're very, very loud. But so, mitigate that in the most practical way. And ideally, you'll know what way is most practical for that mom. She likely will not tell you because everyone's got this. We'll talk about like therapizing the entire nation later. And then watching for things that may perpetuate a stigma. Like, you said you had to go back to work really early. Don't tell her like, oh, well, the baby's going to miss you, blah, blah, blah. Like leave that shit at the door. Like,
Yeah, that
you're
just
not,
adds fuel to the fire. Like
you're like, oh
reminds us,
shit, I didn't know that.
oh geez, I had no idea. Like, oh, I already feel bad, but now other
Oh.
people know that I should feel bad.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I just thought he was going to walk around in my womb for like 9.5 months and I was going to be like, see ya.
I could share an actual real life comment that somebody did say to me.
Yes. Okay.
Asking about my work and transitioning to a shift. Someone actually said, oh, so you're going to go to work. You're not going to raise your child. Literally those words. And I wanted to say like, well, I mean, he is a year now. Like, I was just going to leave him out back and let the coyotes kind of teach him the ropes.
Why do children need to be raised? Like, go pick berries in the forest, sir.
Yeah.
No, and I think also like the likelihood that if you were a boy, the likelihood that someone would say that is like insane.
It would never happen, I think. Like, I know that I get questions if I'm seen without my son. Hey, where's Archer? And I'm like, oh,
I left him in the bathtub alone.
Oh, crap. Thanks for reminding me.
Next time I'll roll the window down. Like,
yeah, exactly. Just crack it a bit, right? My husband, after 2 years, has yet to ever be asked when he's out on his own, hey, where's Archer? That's something to kind of...
I agree. Like, well, it was funny because like I was sitting around at this entrepreneurs thing and it was interesting for me because in my head at that time, like Michael and I had just gotten married and we were thinking about like, what do we do with that? Have busy life in the business land, which would be like wildly negatively impacted by physical thing of having a child. So don't get at me public about that. But anyway, we were thinking about like the logistics, right? They're going around the table and they're talking about how difficult it was for them to be able to come home at 6 o'clock and parent their kids. And you're like, imagine like having to figure out how you're going to actually get that done physically. And then on top of it, and then that stuff. So we're going to I think we'll have another lovely podcast about different preconceptions of society, etc. We'll get into that real hard. And we'll do that one about one thing I really want to talk to you about, or like maybe we'll talk to one of the other psychs at Shift about is loss and grief, particularly with baby, because it's a bit different than our normal grief structures because sometimes people think they minimize it a little bit, but sometimes that relationship is big. So we'll talk about that one, but we've got a bunch of wonderful help for people, like being careful with your words. Before you say anything, please rehearse it in your head. And if you're not sure, then kindly shut the app would be great.
It's this funny thing, Andrea, is that people think that silence is a bad option. And I'm telling you, silence is not a bad option compared to some things you might say. Silence doesn't typically harm a person, whereas, a platitude when someone's struggling, not super helpful.
Well, the other thing, I agree with you so wholeheartely, but the other thing I think is good is if you don't know, sometimes the best thing you can do is ask a question. Like get your 5-year-old self on and be like, why? What do you need? What would this mean? What are you thinking? Like, don't presuppose that you know what somebody should do or how they should be or what they should feel or what their entire experience is. Just ask. Yeah. And there's a beautiful thing that happens with curiosity. I think you and I get to enjoy it a whole shit ton in our work every day. I'm like, why'd you do that? What's happening with that? I'm genuinely inquisitive like that, as are you, which is why I think like our private conversations, which maybe we'll record another one of, are very, very fun because like it's a lot of like, well, why'd you think that? Why'd you do that? Da, da, da. Yeah. So when you do see these things, even if some of the things that you see are a bit scary or a bit disturbing or not so happy, lead with just why or what's happening or why. So you're going to come back and chat with me or one of the other shifters a little bit about the grief in stillbirth and stuff like that. It was a complete pleasure. I will make that lasagna and I'll send it down to Calgary for you. Thank you very much for joining us, Sarah. And
thanks so much for having me.
See y'all.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Shift Show. Be sure to check out our website, shiftpsych.com, for more great content to help you optimize your life. Follow us on social media at ShiftPsych and let us know if you have ideas or things you'd really like to hear about on the podcast. If you found this useful or interesting, which you probably did since you're still here, please share and review the show. And make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This lets us know that you like what you hear so we can bring you more of it. The podcast was brought to you by ShiftPsych's results-driven mind trainers. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Shift Show.